And if you can make the inside as real to you as the outside is, you will truly know the kingdom of heaven and all that is in it. All right, here we have Dawn today, and she's going to spend with us about an hour talking to us about her story and Dylan's story. That's how you say his name, right? Dylan.
Mhm.
Okay. And your personal journey. So let's actually get started. I would like to ask you where you're from, first of all, and where you're calling us from.
Yeah, I'm from Quincy, Illinois, which is like this central most western part of Illinois. I'm right on the Mississippi River.
Oh, I see. Are you in nature, surrounded by nature?
Yes, yeah, it's small town, maybe 40,000 people.
Oh, I see. Okay. All right. So we met because of your son that I didn't get the chance to meet on this earth, but from the other side, even if just a little bit. And so we are here today to share his story and to share your story because I feel like it's going to be very healing and it's going to bring um, hope in people's lives. So let's get started and just talk to us about who Dylan was while he was here and his essence.
Sure. So Dylan was my only child. He was born in 1997 on September 16th, and he was a Tuesday child. So what does that say? Tuesdays children are full of grace. I think the nursery rhyme goes.
Mhm.
So, Dylan was a very outgoing. He never knew a stranger. He felt very comfortable around adults, as a matter of fact. I always felt like, not when Dylan was in his earthly body, but in his spiritual sense, I always, after his death, I felt, he was such an old soul. Like he used to say things that I had no idea where he was getting that from. Like he had had a conversation before with adults, because he felt so comfortable, and maybe that could have been too because he was an only child as well. So he spent a lot of time around adults. But yes, he was a very outgoing kid. He always had friends. He wasn't the kind of only kid though that liked to play alone.
Hmm.
I've known some, only children that they do very well with playing on their own, but Dylan was not. He always had to have someone around him, and and he always had like a an eclectic kind of friends. He had friends who came from very, well-to-do neighborhoods, and he had friends that did not, and he
Hmm.
accepted everyone.
Hmm.
He always stood up for the underdog. There was a time in high school when I got a phone call from one of the coaches, and there was a practice, and
Hmm.
this young lady was getting kind of harassed by this boy, and Dylan, stepped in and stood up for her. And the coach, it went a bit beyond because they got in a fight, but the coach did call me and he said, Dylan was shouldn't have done what he did, but he was standing up for this young lady. So in a sense, that was Dylan. He was horrible at telling lies. Like if I would catch him in one, I, I'd be like, yeah, and he's like, yeah, no, I did it, or I didn't do it, or whatever. But um, yeah, he was a great kid. He gave me a lot of gray hair, but what child doesn't sometimes, right? Um, so, Dylan struggled in school. He about the
Hmm.
age second grade, he was labeled ADHD, and as a mom, that's something you don't want to hear. I mean, you don't want any label put on your child to begin with. At least I didn't. But we enveloped it. We got him on some medication, and now I know actually a lot of times kids who are ADHD or ADD, which is what Dylan was, he didn't have any hyperactivity. He just could not concentrate. And so that made his grades suffer. But I found out later that a lot of times with ADD or ADHD, children also suffer from anxiety, and Dylan did have anxiety. And what I was used to hearing about anxiety was that people would, you have like a panic attack, or you have this kind of overwhelming sense of, I got to get out of here. Dylan's was exhibited mostly, he didn't want to get up in the morning. He didn't want to go to school. School gave him a lot of anxiety. Later, I found out. Um, so about the second grade, yeah, Sylvia, he was put on medication. He did not like taking the medication as he got older, and he stopped actually taking it. Um,
Mm.
but he, like I said, his grades, and he got teased a lot in grade school about it. He went to a Catholic grade school and middle school, and it was a very small, cliquish kind of school. And he actually at one time begged me to take him out, and because the kids were bullying him. Um, and at that time, I said, well, Dylan, if I move you to a private school or to a public school, all we're doing is running from the problem. We're not taking care of it. And so I sent a letter to the school and talked to the principal, and she was going to talk to the students, and it got a little better. Um, so then he moved out of the middle school at the 8th grade level, because they did. Then he went to a public high school. He actually asked me if he could do that, and I said, absolutely, we can do that. And he loved it. He excelled at a lot of things. His grades got a little better, but not too much better. But he had some friends and started experimenting with marijuana. And I found one day I found it and confronted him on it.
Mm.
And this was before recreational marijuana was, legal or anything. And he would tell me, Mom, the marijuana slows my brain down. And
Mm.
I got that. I understood that. But the problem is he was taking medication to help with the concentration, which was already slowing his brain down. And then he was self-medicating with marijuana. And, I tried to explain to him the two can't go together. And one, I wasn't going to tolerate it. At that time, like I said, it wasn't legal. He was only 17, 18 years old. And I did not want it in the house either. So it was a hard time at that time. Um, and, you know, we went on a vacation to South Africa. My husband is from South Africa.
I didn't
And
know that.
then, yeah, and in the summer of 2015, we took a 2-week trip, which Dylan had been before, um, to South Africa. And he's been, we had traveled to England, and he was a great traveler. He loved to travel. And he was so like, with the native tribes in South Africa, he was so enveloping, like I remember the first time we took him, he was 7, and we went out way in a desolate part of South Africa to go hunting. My husband's a big hunter, and you have to realize in South Africa, they still have people who work the farm, and those people are Black, um, and there were children at the farm. And I remember Dylan had back then he had a Game Boy. You remember the little square video type, and those children were like, what in the heck is that? They had never seen anything like that.
Right.
But then on the other hand, Dylan had never seen anybody live in a home with a dirt floor,
Mm.
or have none of the things that he had. And I remember, him saying, Mom, they have this, it was like a deer, a springbuck hanging over their fire, in their fireplace in their home. And he said, that's what they eat. And I said, well, yeah, and so we kind of talked about that. But he had like, children, it's universal. Like they played like no tomorrow, and there was no black, no white. It was just kids coming together, and it was the best experience that he ever had, I think, in his entire life, to see and to be a part of that. And I remember we got on the plane and he cried. He did not want to leave.
Wow.
Yeah. And it was just like, oh, you know, and just, if you could teaching my child, and I didn't even teach him, I just did let him experience that. And, as he got older, I think he carried that through because he wanted to go to camp, or actually he did go to camp 4 years in a row, to a camp down in Southern Illinois. And he just loved that. He loved being around younger kids and helping them too. I think he thought, you know, he learned from his own actions and being around children who didn't have a lot. So,
Hmm. It feels like he was reconnecting with his roots as well, the father side of
yeah.
his ancestors. Hmm.
Well, now, so that's not his biological father. So,
Oh,
yeah, so Charles is actually his stepfather. Yeah.
so it's even more interesting then, because it
Yeah.
feels like there was a special connection there.
Yeah. Oh, wholeheartedly, I agree with you, Sylvia. There was, like I said, I just think that Dylan was an old soul. And you know, I don't know. Like I said, he could feel comfortable pretty much in any setting. But behind the scenes, as he grew older, the anxiety started to set in more. Um, and, a lot of the kids after Dylan died said, and this was like right after Robin Williams passed away from suicide, said, he was a lot like Robin Williams. He joked, he
I have
masked.
a rush of goosebumps right now because the other day I started researching Robin Williams before I messaged you,
Uh-huh.
and I didn't know why I was doing that. I wanted to know his story. So now you're talking about it, and I have just like shivers all down my spine. Sorry, continue.
No, that's fine. Yeah. So a lot of they said, Dylan, um, masked it very well. He did not, if, he didn't want anybody to know, I think, and this is hindsight, that he was, sad. And he projected it in by helping others when they were sad. After he died, I got a message from a classmate who I didn't know, because Dylan actually, when he went to public school, oh, sorry, when he went to public school, it was a big school. So there was a lot of kids that I knew, or that I knew and didn't know. And so she sent this Facebook message to me, and she said that when they were in, I believe it was like a driver's ed class. So that would put Dylan like about 14, 15. There was a young man in the class who was epileptic. And Dylan would always offer to walk him to the restroom to make sure that, nothing ever happened when he was there. And, you know, um, he was staying outside the door, of course, but, just to make sure that he was okay. And I thought that was great that she sent me that. There were so many stories that I heard after his death of him helping, other people.
It's
And,
incredible.
yeah, as a mom, that you're like, oh, well, I did good. I raised him right. Stella, stop, please.
And the fact that he was not sharing that with you, and those are the magical things that you get to discover afterwards. It's like, wow, that was my child. Wow,
It's, yeah, yeah,
how
he would have
magical.
told me anything like that, because I would have said, "Oh, Dylan, that's," and he would have, "Oh, mom." He's like, he'd be like, "Oh, mom, it's nothing."
Right, 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 right. So it's interesting. I was talking with Shannon yesterday, and Cody, her daughter, also had ADHD. So it's very interesting. I met a few people that have talked to me about that, and I never like connected anxiety, sadness, depression with us as a society not really knowing how to deal with ADHD besides medications.
Mhm.
Um, so, but if I don't, if I'm not mistaken, Did he go to the military afterwards?
No, he wanted to.
Oh, he wanted
Yeah.
to.
Yeah, he actually, we, like, I think the beginning of his senior year, right before he died, we took him, he wanted to join the Marine Corps, which I tried to talk him out of it. But anyway, he went and took like the pre-ASVAB test. They call it an ASVAB test. And he did well. I was in the military. Maybe that might have been a confusion too. So I was in the
Okay.
Navy, but he always wanted to join the military. Yeah. Both
Mm,
both his dad and I, his biological father, we were in the Navy. So
okay. So, um, all right. So going from like him feeling anxiety and anxiety really like kicking in his later adolescence years. Um, and I didn't know that he was 3 years younger than me, by the way. Oh, 2 years. He's 97, you said?
he was 1997. He was born.
And I'm 1995. Interesting. They're just so contemporary. I use the word contemporary, but they're really contemporaries of mine. So how did it go from just feeling anxiety to the point that he didn't know what to do with it, or to the point of feeling uh, desperation that makes you feel like you don't want to live anymore?
Yeah. Well, it was a progressive, you know, and I want to say almost progressive disease, because I don't, I think we need to take mental health and look at it, just like we do physical health, somebody who has diabetes or somebody who has cancer. So it was a progression. And I think because he masked it so well, even I didn't know he was suffering inside. And then, with the marijuana, I just kind of chalked it up to experimental, typical teenage boy kind of thing. And so, it got, he ran away. Well, so it got worse. And he was starting to do more risky behavior.
Hmm.
And like I said, hindsight, I didn't see those signs. I just, like I said, I chalked it up to um, teenage behavior. So in October, we, he and I got into an argument on the phone. I think it was about, and here's how trivial it was to me. It might have been about grades or something like that, but it really upset him. And he ran away that afternoon. He took his bike. I have no idea to this day really where he went, but it scared me enough that Jim, his father, and I, and Charles, my husband at the time, contacted the police, which the chief of police is a really good friend. His sons went to school with Dylan. And so, they do what they need to do. And then I think he was gone about 3 hours. Um, and he came home and we talked about it. And I remember distinctly, he sat on the couch with me and he said, Mom, I'm so sorry. I shouldn't have run, I shouldn't have done that. And the cop actually came, and the police officer was very nice. He talked about life and how things can be hard, and, that kind of stuff. So the police officer was very, comforting. And so things got a little bit better. That was October. Um, and then he was working as a lifeguard at the local Croc Center here. It's a fitness center. And a few weeks prior to that runaway part, he wrecked his car. And like, that's what I was talking about, risky behavior. He and a friend, they were going way too fast, and he's very lucky that nothing else happened. So I took the car away from him. Well, I mean, it was to a point where he couldn't drive it. I had to get it fixed. But I told him, I said, I'm going to get it fixed, but you're going to pay me, for the damage.
Hmm.
So the car was fixed, but I told him, he couldn't have it back. So I took it out to my sister's house and kept it there, because I knew it would be difficult for him to see that car, parked in front of our house. And, you know,
Not using it.
I was trying to be, I didn't want to like throw it in his face, but yet hold him accountable for paying for the damages. And
Hmm.
then that's when he did the runaway part after an argument that we had. And then his grades got a little better. And the soccer team at the high school was going to state, which they had not been to state championship um, in quite some time. And so Dylan begged me. He said, "Mom, can I please go?" Well, there was another boy and his dad were going, and the dad was going to be driving in one car with a set of parents, and then Dylan would be in the other car with a couple of the high school kids. And I said, "Well, that's fine," since they were going to be chaperoned. And I think they were going maybe about 3 hours away is where they were headed. And so he worked that night before, and I picked him up, and he packed his bag, which, you know, my 18-year-old kid, I mean, as far as Dylan packing a bag, half the time I always have to check to make sure that he has everything in it. So we all went to bed that night. Everything seemed fine. I'd set aside some money for him to take. And so I got up that morning, got dressed for work. It was a Friday. And I thought, you know what, I'm just going to quickly go in his room while he's sleeping and grab his bag to make sure that he's got everything in there. And, he didn't. But anyway, I found a thing of marijuana, a pot. I don't even know what you call it, like a pod of some sort. And by this time, we had been round and round with him still using. He was sneaking it. And so I didn't get angry. I didn't yell. I didn't do anything. I woke him up and I told him, I said, "Dylan, I can't let you go." I said, you've, now broken the rules. And he was pretty despondent. He got very angry. But then after a few minutes, he almost kind of went, as I describe it, kind of a catatonic. He just kind of sat on the couch and didn't say anything. It was almost like he was just checked out. And so, I said, "Well, you're not going to be able to go." And he goes, "Well, I'm not going to go to school." And I said, "Well, that's your prerogative." I said, "But right now, I just can't deal with this right now." And so Charles came down and we talked. Dylan still sat on the couch, didn't say hardly anything. And, at this time, I'm feeling pretty defeated and worn out. And so I said, "Well, look, I got to go to work. I can't deal with this right now." And I left. And then Charles said, "Well, I'll stay with him for a few minutes." And then he was going to go. And Dylan had gone to his room. I think Charles had talked to him a little bit, and, he was kind of sulking in his room. So he called me and he said, "I'll get to work. And when one of his staff gets to work, then I'll come back and check on him." And I said, "Okay." And so he got to work, and the staff member didn't show up. So he called me and he said, "Hey, listen, I can't go back." And I said, "Well, I have a meeting at 10. So at 10:15, my meeting got finished. And I told my staff, I said, "Hey, I'm going to go home and check on Dylan." But, as a mom, we all have the sixth sense about stuff, I think, I believe. And when I was driving home, I had turned the corner to our house, and instantly 3 things went in my mind. I thought either he's still sulking in his room, or once again he's ran away, or he's dead. And I actually felt that. Now, thinking it and feeling it were two completely separate things. It just popped in my head. And when I got home, I pulled in, and I had just I think I just grabbed my phone, and I had my keys, and I turned the lock to get into our house. And our house is a bungalow. We live in a 1929 bungalow, so it's all open when you come into the house. It's the living room, dining room, and kitchen. Excuse me. And I came in, and I saw his feet first, and he was laying in the living room, and he had shot himself. He had taken a 9mm. So my husband, like I said, is a hunter, and he has a gun room, and every gun downstairs has a lock through it. There's no ammunition that was out, except for one bag that Charles had used like 2 weeks prior, and he had just kind of set it in there, and then locked the room. It's a locked room; you can't get in it. Well, it's a wood door, and Dylan kicked a panel of the door out, and he found that gun and he shot himself. And I can tell you that, you know, when I came through the door and saw Dylan, you know, like it was almost like I took flight, like every like whoever I was that day literally left my body. And I, I saw him for a split second. I knew he was dead. I ran. I don't know. I ran through the house. I don't know what I was doing running, but anyway, then I ran out, and I ran to my next door neighbor across the street, and I was just screaming, "He's dead! He's dead! He's dead!" And I remember collapsing on her floor, and I couldn't get up. I couldn't move my legs. I mean, when I've seen people on TV after a death and they fall to the floor, and they've said they can't, that's the truth. I couldn't even use my legs. And she, poor, Janet, who's probably about 15 years older than I am, she was like, "What are you talking?" And I think she came over here. I don't know if she saw Dylan. I still, to this day, I've never asked her that. But then she called 911. And then after that, things were a complete blur. I I have no idea. I remember the I think it was an EMT guy maybe came in and asked me what he could do for me. And I think I screamed at him, "Bring back my son," you know. Um, and then like I've still put bits and pieces of that day together. Um, and I don't mean to label, because I don't like labeling people, but do I have some post-traumatic stress? Sure, I do. It doesn't debilitate me though, because I've worked so much on my healing and my grieving process. And but distinctly remember, and I think I told you this, Sylvia, the other day, that when the coroner, was getting ready to take Dylan, because unfortunately, when somebody shoots themselves or it's a suicide, or presumed suicide, the body has to be autopsied. And so I asked the coroner, who was another friend of mine, I said, "Is there a chance that we can have an open casket?" And he kind of looked at me like, "Why are you asking me this?" And I said, "I just need to know, because I couldn't remember, when he shot himself, if it did any, I mean, I literally, when I came in, and I'm sitting right now in the same living room that he shot himself. It was almost like a scene out of a movie. He was perfectly laying still. His knees were kind of to the side. His hands were, I mean, it looked like like God had just taken his life and left his vessel, you know. Anyway, the coroner said, "I think we can," and I said, "Okay." And early on, I mean, I wanted, at his funeral, I wanted the kids to see Dylan. I wanted them to know that this is not okay. Taking your own life is not okay. Now,
Hmm.
I have come though in my own healing in order to find peace. I've had to surrender for me, that Dylan died at the right time, and he died in the manner that he wanted to die. Now, there are probably going to be people that are listening right now, or that are going to be listening to this on a recording, and they're going to go, you're out of your ever loving mind. Why would you say that?" But for me, I have to, because if I continue to say he he left too soon, or he shouldn't have done that, then it only creates pain for me,
Hmm.
and I refuse to live the rest of my life in pain.
Hmm.
So we did have an open casket, and a lot of the kids, I mean, I can't even tell you the amount of kids. I think we had like 800 people come to his funeral.
Wow.
And And then I had him cremated. And I have a necklace, actually, I don't have it on right now, but I have a necklace. It's a cross and it has some of his ashes in it. I knew I wanted him cremated because I always wanted to keep him with me
Mm,
um, at that time. But now I know, Dylan's never left me. He's always with me, and he's sitting right now next to me because he's done a hell of a job because I'm not crying. Because before this, I would have been like bawling my eyes out telling you this story.
right.
But as you can see him in the back right here and here and here, so he's all around me. So,
Mm, I love that. I love that. And I love that you said um, that it's very important to get to a point in which we accept, or you accepted what happened for what it was, because there is no way that we can change that or go back to that the moment before that moment.
right.
As much as it's something that you didn't, I feel like you might have felt that you didn't agree with, or you didn't want for it to happen.
Yeah.
But I feel like it's a way for you to respect the way that he decided to exit
Mhm.
this earthly life.
Yeah, and Sylvia, I was never mad at Dylan either. And I was never mad at God. You know, I remember the youth pastors coming, that because Dylan he played floor hockey at one of the local churches, and he got really involved in one of the youth groups there. And I remember the youth pastors coming in because I had reached out to them too about Dylan, asking for help. Is there something you can help me with as
Mm,
far as what was going on? And I remember, I do remember, I don't know if I yelled, but I remember saying, you know what, I prayed and I prayed and I prayed, and it didn't do any good. But that was the day he died, and I was, you know, I mean, I was hysterical. And then as time went on, uh, but like I said, never once was I mad at Dylan, and never once was I mad at God. And then as I started working very hard at my grief and it became, that's what I learned, that I had to surrender that.
mm, So, before going on and having you talking about your healing journey, I wanted to ask you something, because yesterday I was trying to understand also Cody and what she went through and why she was using substances. Um, so I have tried marijuana myself, so I know that in my case, and that's also what Shannon was saying about Cody, it kind of like numbs down all the sensation, all the feeling, and it slows down the thoughts. And um, it feels like everything that you worry about doesn't exist, and it's not like a heavy drug like other things. So my question is, do you think that that's why um, he was using it, because he wanted to kind of like feel less overwhelmed by all the external stimuli that he was receiving?
Yeah, I mean, he was open and honest, and he said, Mom, it makes my brain slow down, and I can think much better. And he was right. I mean, I know what THC is, but it's a depressant as well.
Hmm.
And I got it. And maybe, now in today's world, maybe, it would have been beneficial for him and gotten into maybe a medical marijuana.
Hmm.
I don't know, and that's, we're only, as parents, we're only as good as with the information that we have at the present
Right.
time, right? And so that's all I knew at that time. I knew that it wasn't good for him. Although
Hmm.
he told me, yes, Mom, it helps me. And I totally got that. But, I was of the old school that you don't do it, you know.
Hmm. Hmm.
I wasn't going to have it in my house because it wasn't legal at that time. So,
Hmm. Yeah, and I understand when I think about my mom, what she was trying to do with my brothers as well, were was trying to make them responsible with, you did this, you wrecked the car, now you pay for it. You want to live here, you pay a little bit of rent to try to make them responsible and get them ready for the real life. So yeah, I totally understand that that's where you were coming from. So there is another thing that just came to mind that you told me the other day, and that Shannon told me as well last night. Is just so incredible um, to me. Um, you told me that there was a moment in which you said that you were completely hysterical and your like spirit left the body, like you were in and out and it's a blur. But you said that there was a moment in which you wanted to feel the same thing that he felt in that moment,
Mm.
and I found it very interesting.
Yeah. So, boy, after Dylan's death, I sunk. I went back to work about 3 weeks after his death because I felt like, well, what was I going to do at home? I mean,
Mm,
sit in a chair and do nothing. So I went back to work. I started drinking heavily too. It wouldn't be shocking that I would drink a bottle of wine almost every night. One night, my husband, I can't remember if he was out of town or if he was just at work, but coming from South Africa, he always still felt like he had to have a gun by the bed or whatever. And I always used to tell him, I'm like, Charles, we're not in South Africa anymore. But anyway, it made him feel comfortable and I was okay with it. So there was a revolver that he always kept by the bedside. And I remember drinking that night and feeling pretty shitty. And, I got that gun. I took it out of the bedside. I knew it was loaded. Um, and one part of me wanted to die. And the other part was I wanted to feel that steel on my head, on my forehead. I wanted to know just some a semblance of what that felt like to Dylan, you know, because I tried to piece, so much of that day. Um, I asked so many questions. I asked questions of the coroner, why was the bullet, up here? And why was the gun in Dylan's left hand? Because my son's not left-handed. And, what was it like for him to come out of his room that day? And what did he do? And, what was it like for him to go down in the basement? And then what was he thinking when he came up in this upstairs? And how long did it take? I mean, I went through the whole scenario trying to relive every moment, before those last minutes of his death. And one of them was in that, what happens in that split second when you put that gun to your head and you actually pull the trigger. And, of course I didn't get any answers, but kind of, it felt, cool to my head. I felt the weight of the gun and I could have, um, but I didn't. And I thought of my parents. And, I'd been drinking and it wasn't the smartest thing to do in my I mean, I'm going to be 56 next week and it's, probably the stupidest thing I've ever done in my entire life. And I've never been the kind of person that ever thought of taking my life. Never. Um, but my child was dead and I wanted to be with him.
mm,
So I don't think it's, I've talked to other moms and dads and, not everyone, but there's a lot of them that have felt the same way,
mm,
or, or we have what we call passive suicidal ideations where, I remember we went to Florida like about a week. It was just a couple days after Dylan's funeral. A friend of ours gave us their timeshare in Florida because I told Charles, I said, I just have to get away I need to get out of town. And I remember being on the plane and I literally I said, if this plane goes down, I mean, I'm sorry for everybody else, but I'm okay with it. Or I would be in my car at the stop sign and I would think, man, if a car or a truck or something. So, I don't have those anymore, but I don't fear death. I mean, I've never feared death. I've always never wanted to die in pain, but when it's my time, it's my time.
Mm. I have a question for you. Oh my goodness, I have so many questions. And thank you so much for sharing that, because I feel like we're breaking the stigma for your children, but also for the parents that go through this, because as you're saying, many think about that even when their child didn't die by suicide. They still feel like,
Yeah.
um, how am I supposed to live, um, how am I supposed to live when I want to not live? And that's going to be, what we're going to talk about in a second. My question is, have you ever thought about the afterlife before? Like, have you ever thought about where do we go, or what happens when we die? Did you have any knowledge about it or interest in knowing?
No, I never did until Dylan's death. And, as a kid being raised Catholic, um, I mean, I had older, grandparents and die when I was young. And I learned that when you die, you go to heaven. And that's where my grandparents are. You look up and you pray to heaven and you pray to God. And um, never in my wildest dreams would I have ever thought that heaven can be anywhere, or that heaven's all around me. And what I choose to believe, in opening my heart and my mind and my eyes and seeing signs. I never did that before. I never did that. I mean, I would never have thought to do that.
Hmm.
And so yeah, I mean, I was raised that way, that heaven was just up,
Hmm.
and that's where people went.
Hmm. Hmm. Interesting. Yes. So how did your journey look like? Afterward, you said that you have to work very hard on your grief. And I mean, it's obvious that talking about all that you talked about without feeling emotional, it's something that for those that are going to watch this feels like it's never going to happen to me. I'm
Yeah.
never going to get out of this. And that's why I feel like Dylan actually put us in contact, because I feel like people need to see that no, you can go back to enjoy life, smile, feel radiant, feel heaven around you, connect with your son, with your child, and receive signs. So how did the healing journey look like for you? I know that it's not a straight line for anybody,
Yeah.
but what happened? What did you search? What did you seek then? What came to you, um, when it
Yeah.
comes to that?
Well, it took a few months, for me to pull myself. Um, I mean, and I can remember gauging it like the fog, like I had this shroud of a fog over me, and then gradually I could feel it lifting a little bit. Um, I like to research things. So I'm a breast cancer survivor. And when I had breast cancer, and I was going to go on different medication, I had to Google everything, read everything, which everybody told me not to do.
Hmm.
But when Dylan died, I wanted to know, my God, I can't, am I the only one? I mean, am I the only one that's had a kid die by suicide? Am I the only one who's had an only child die? And so I Googled I Googled books, I read books, different books. And one of the books I found was a book by Tom Zuba, and it was Permission to Mourn, a New Way to Do Grief. And Tom's book literally saved my life. You know, he, uh, he has had 3 members die of his family. And so that's what I did. I started reading books. I started going to retreats. Um, I actually, in, let's see, April of 2017, I had planned a retreat to Mount Shasta. And, Mount Shasta is kind of like the Sedona of Northern California. It's a very, it's a vortex of spirituality, and Native Americans have, have had very healing experiences there. So I had started that. Um, and I was prepared to go, and it was going to be two ladies who were doing it. One, and both of them had members die by suicide. So I kind of wanted that connection of somebody, who's had an experience with suicide. I'm not saying suicide is different or in its own realm of death. For me, just wanted to relate to someone, who's had someone die by suicide. The ladies had it all set, and then they called me like about a week before, and they didn't get enough people for the grief retreat, which kudos to them. That's great, So my husband said, Dawn, you should still go. And so they put me in touch with a gentleman by the name of Andrew Ozier, who is a spiritual healing guide on Mount Shasta. And um, I went on my own. I had a cabin at a remote place right outside Mount Shasta. There was no internet or anything. And I found that it was probably one of the most healing experiences. I left with so much anxiety, um, scared out of my mind. Like, not that I have never traveled by myself before, but like, I don't know. I was scared. I didn't know you know, the what ifs, but it was the best experience I ever had in my entire life. And when I got on the plane, I had such a feeling of hope, knowing that, Dylan is always with me, and he's never left. So that's what I did. I read a lot of books. I went to retreats. I went to a few of Tom Zuba's retreats. Um, and I do gratitude journals. I do a gratitude every day. Um, when I'm driving, my eyes and my heart are always open. I may be outside with my dogs and a dragonfly go by. Before Dylan's death, it would have been a dragonfly.
Hmm.
It's not a dragonfly anymore. It's a sign from my son saying, "Hey, mom, I got you,"
Hmm.
or anything. I started finding pennies actually right away in odd places. The pennies aren't as prevalent anymore. It can be really anything.
Hmm.
And
But
he
you
just,
feel that it's from him.
yes, yes,
Yes. You trust that.
yeah. And I have conversations with Dylan at night,
Hmm.
especially at night before I go to bed. Um, and I mean, I don't hear voices, but he and I are having a conversation, you know, in my head.
Hmm. Hmm. When you talk to me about all this in my mind, like, I don't know, people that are going to hear this probably are going to think that it's completely nuts. But I see, like, when you say that you're having a conversation with them, I just see this advanced technology that spirit uses to communicate with us, where when you say that you have a conversation with him, what I saw in my head, honestly, is him sitting on his bed and seeing like you as a hologram right in front of him, just like what you would see if you could see his spirit here. And just talking back to you as if, now we send emails and we send text messages, and we're doing this Zoom thing that was not possible like 20, 30 years ago.
Right.
Talking about Zoom, like, what are you talking about? you
Yeah,
know
like pets and stuff.
yeah, it's like, so. And when I went to the spirit world, in my one of my experiences that encouraged me so much, that showed me, yes, this is real. It's a real place, and we actually remain the same, because my fear was, my goodness, I'm going to dissolve into nothingness. And um, I remember seeing these technological things that I don't have the words for it or the labels, because they are not here yet, but they are already using it. And I feel like us, in our core, there is a part of us that remembers how advanced the spiritual world is, and we're trying to bring that here. And so we already are using it, like the power of thought, for example. That is like having a phone call, or ringing, making or sending a message, and letting
Yeah,
them know, hey, I want to talk to you.
yeah.
I
And the
love
great
that.
thing is I can talk. So, I mean, honestly, Sylvia, my relationship with Dylan is even more, I don't want to say in depth, but more developed than when he was alive.
Mm.
because, as a teenager, he'd be gone, he'd be with his friends. I sometimes, he'd be lucky. I'd be lucky if he returned my text or answered a phone call. Well, now I can talk to him whenever I want,
Right.
you know? So
Right.
it's even a deeper relationship that I have with him now.
Mm. Mm-mm. And I love what you said earlier, we get to decide how we want to deal with what happened. So and that's something else that came up in other, in the other interview the other day. um the suggestion was literally like mourn, grieve the way that you feel comfortable with, do what you need to do. You don't have to give anybody any type of explanation, because only if you have gone through what you have gone through, you know what you've gone through, and you know why you are reacting the way that you are reacting. So I have a very strong feeling that there are some people here that are going to watch this and are going to feel like, oh, I've never thought that I could respect the fact that my child decided to exit this world in this way. And I
Yeah.
always think about, when we are in spirit before coming here, because I believe that if there is an afterlife, there is also a before. We don't see death as such a tragedy as we see once we are here, because we forgot what death actually is, which is, as you were saying, going back home where we belong. We see as death as part of the process. I'm going to go there temporarily, anyways. But
Mhm.
then once we come here, we forget about that, and there is no education about it. It's a very uncomfortable topic to talk about, and so even if we are educated, of course, there is going to be some sort of grief. Um, and but I also love the book, or at least the title of the book, because I have not read it, Permission to Mourn.
Yeah.
Giving ourselves the permission. And I don't know how you went back to work after 3 weeks, but um you know it's
It was
it's your particular journey,
Yeah.
unique.
Yeah. It was hard, but I knew that, by sitting here,
Mm-mm.
wasn't doing me any good. And I needed to be busy, in those first several months and even into the first couple of years. Um, but then I knew I was running. And so I really needed to dive deep. And I think it was about Dylan died November 6th of 2015. It was about 7 or 8 months into, and that's when I found Tom's book, and that's when I started, really diving deep into my grief. But boy, it was a tug. It was like a constant battle.
Mm.
I do a little bit, and then I'd be like, no, I can't do this. I do a little bit, and then, but I think that's just how it goes. I gave myself a lot of grace to be sad, and I finally decided to stop telling people I was okay when I wasn't. And I think that's the biggest thing too with like mental health, um, and grief. Um, and that's just telling people we're okay when we're really not. And and the tagline, it's okay not to be okay.
Mm.
It is okay. And we put so much, mental health gets such a bad rap, and it's no different than physical health. If we don't have good mental health, we don't have good physical health
It's true.
either.
Right.
This organ, or it runs everything.
Mm.
So it's like if I don't feel good, then I don't go to the gym.
Mm-hmm.
If I'm feeling really good and motivated, then I'm going to go work out.
Mm-mm.
That's how I look at it.
Mm.
And the same with anything. I mean, but after Dylan died, it was a lot of ups and downs. And I mean, you're right. It's not linear. Grief is like all over the place. So,
Mm-mm. Mm-mm. I
and now,
love.
now I know, like when I do start feeling really down, or, going down that rabbit hole, as I call it, I know now I can pull myself out and stay in the present moment.
Mm.
staying, being mindful is what, you know, practicing mindfulness is what I do.
Mm-mm. Yeah, I see that. The way that I personally perceive it is that if you are where you are, it's because Dylan as well has done the work. Because when you ask yourself, what happens if I, pull the trigger right now? I asked myself that question so many times. And I didn't really like the answer because the answer was, well, just get rid of the body and you keep on living. It's like, no, but I don't want to. Like, there is no end. Like, there needs to be an end. So it's like, okay, I imagine myself, all right, so I don't have the physical body anymore. I keep on living, but everybody now is thinking that I am dead, but I keep on living. And there is some work that we have to do on ourselves also, like accepting the fact that now that's the reality for us, and there is no way to go back in that body that we inhabited, and then seeing everything that that caused, and like, okay, there is help, because in the spiritual world, just like here, there are people that help. Even if we are imperfect human beings, we're still willing to help one another. In the spirit world is the same. So I see Dylan, uh, he needs to have done the same work, if not more, to be able to be by your side and just do this together and be at the level that you are together.
Yeah,
That's how I perceive it.
yeah, I agree.
And I love it because it truly, as you're saying, moments of despair and sadness happen in the life of anybody in general,
Right.
especially if you have a loved one, or especially if you have your child on the other side. But knowing that you can pull yourself out of it because you basically prepared, or uh, made up, put together, that's the right word, a toolbox, a set of resources within yourself, in your mind,
Hmm.
and also outside, to be able to, okay, I'm feeling this way. I can do this, this, and this, and that to go back and feel, uplifted. Because we already know that if we give energy to that feeling, we already know where it leads us. And we
Hmm.
feel disconnected and we feel like hopeless. But if we pull ourselves out of it, first of all, it's something that nobody can really do besides us. And I feel like what happened to you, help to step into a power that you probably didn't know that you had, which is the power of learning how to get yourself out of those moments,
Yeah.
um, and forced you as well to find the answers that you were looking for and that connection that you were looking for, and opening the eyes to the dragonfly and to the feelings that allowed you to see, oh my goodness, this is not wishful thinking. This is my son reaching out. Do you have
Hmm.
a story of him, or of a sign? I don't know why I'm asking you this, but of a sign that you're like, yeah, that's him. What, maybe at the beginning, or any of the stories that you have that are like, wow, this is definitely Dylan reaching out.
Yeah. Well, one, and you talk about electronics. So I was at work one day and my phone was ringing. And so Dylan in my phone is Dylan one. My phone was ringing and it was ringing up Dylan one. And I'm like, uh, what is, and so I went and I was literally frozen. I didn't even, I mean, I saw it. And I'm like, what? Well, I'm sure somebody else now has Dylan's cell phone number. But they were, they were calling me, it was probably a missed call from whoever that was, but it was still in my phone as Dylan one. But I was like, I fell back in my chair and I'm like, what? He's, um,
That's
but
him.
yeah,
That's him, because when I know, because my body has a physical reaction to that. It's a lot of effort that they have to make. I don't know if somebody has his phone number, and even if they do, I don't understand why they would call you.
right.
I just have shivers and this emotion that I want to cry, and I'm like, yeah, that's him. I would love, I imagine myself on the other side, and I would love if I send a message or a sign to my mom. I would love for her to acknowledge it. It's like, come on, it took me so much hard work to get that freaking dragonfly on your head, in that moment. Just acknowledge that, and not acknowledge that it's me trying to reach out. So anyway, sorry, continue.
Oh, that's okay. The other one, he doesn't come to me too much in dreams, but the most significant one I had was he was in his coffin, and he looked to be about, wasn't as old as he was maybe about 8 or 9, and he was handing me a ring, like a tiny, tiny gold ring, and it was so thin, and I remember feeling sad in the dream, and I took it, but I didn't want to take it because I didn't know what it meant. And so I kind of let that sit for a while, and then a few weeks later I had a medium reading with a lady, and I told her about it, and I thought, well, maybe she can kind of help me figure out, what did that mean. And instantly she said, well, that's infinity. She said, Dylan's giving you the ring of infinity. It's like, oh, it's like marriage. It your love never dies. And I was like, of course, of course of course he's saying that. So yeah, and that's such a dream I love now, even though it kind of scared me, and made me sad at having it, but it was so real. I
Mm,
mean, I didn't have any sense of smell in the dream, but it was really, yeah. So I
mhm.
love that dream. And, there's lots of signs, Sylvia, that I get. Um, but the phone thing was definitely the eye opener on that one. I was like, oh my gosh.
Mm, mm. I love that. I love that. I love to see how they reach out. Sometimes I receive messages and say, like, crazy things happen, and they also use me to validate the message for their parents. And I remember the other day, this woman was like, "Is this real, Sylvia?" I'm like, I wish this was wishful thinking, but no, it's not. It's real. He's trying. She also has a son in spirit. He's really trying to reach out and to help you on your journey, because I just feel like not everybody understands the importance that we need to work on our grief, because they keep on living, life keeps on happening here, and we need to do something about what we're feeling. um oh my goodness, there was a question that I wanted to ask you. Sleep, I might have so many. Jeez. Oh yes, about the medium. So how did you think about going to a medium?
Oh, right away.
Mm,
Uh, I went, that's the first thing that was one of the other first things that I thought of too, is how can I connect it to Dylan? And I've never, I've always heard about mediums and never dismissed them whatsoever. But I just never felt the need to
the
go to.
need. Okay.
Um, and so this gal was recommended to me from another friend of mine, and it was a phone reading, and she validated um, everything. Um, and there were things like you, Sylvia, telling me about the woodpecker. You would have not, you didn't know that when you told me about the woodpecker that I had seen one, or that very day. I mean, you would have known that. And she also validated a lot of things. She said that she said, Dylan keeps telling me about, there's something in his, so I still have his room, and it's still called Dylan's room. Although I've changed it, it's more of like a meditation room for me now. But it has memorabilia in there of his hockey sticks, and they're on the wall. There's pictures, and there's an armoire of like some of his trophies and things. But anyway, she was saying, he keeps telling me there's something shiny in his room. And I was sitting here in the living room, and I'm like, shiny? What? So I go in his room. Well, it's a geode that was, it's been cracked, and so it's got all of the crystals. And yeah, well, there's the shiny thing. Um, she would never have known that
Right.
because I've never. And then she said, he keeps telling me about a baby, like I'm like, a baby? What? I said, no, we don't have any, you know, babies in our family or anything. And she goes, no, it's a baby like in a white frilly dress or something. And I'm like, so I went back in his room. So when Dylan died, a friend of mine at work, her mom died when she was very young, and someone gave her this doll. And she left it on my front porch with a note. And at first I didn't know who it was from, but then she said that was from me. So there's a doll on Dylan's armoire in a pink frilly dress. So he got the color a little bit mixed, but there's the baby.
Mm.
And then she said, there's a picture. He keeps telling me that he wants did, like, was there a picture drawn of him? And he wants that person to know he loves that picture and he appreciates that picture. And yes, so at his memorial service, one of his classmates drew a pencil drawing, and she brought it, and that hangs in his room.
I
So
love that. I
yeah,
love that. I know that for them, it's not easy to use imperfect vessels that we are, because you know it's hard to penetrate the mind of a person, but they would do anything to let us know that they keep on living, just as much as you would do anything if you were in his shoes, right?
right.
So I guess I have one last question. Thank you so much for sharing, and for sharing everything that you shared. It's just, I'm so excited. I'm so excited, and I keep on feeling. I just love to see how I'm feeling like Dylan, and he makes me feel this rush of shivers. And with Shannon as well, I'm like, wow, I'm so blessed. I'm so grateful for having decided to do this, because I'm the one that is getting a lot out of this, honestly. My question is for those that are going to be watching this, and that might have gone through a similar experience, or maybe not a similar one, but they have their children in spirit, or they're just grieving because of the loss of a loved one. Do you have any words of comfort, encouragement, or hope, or suggestion from your heart?
Well, give yourself a lot of grace, cut yourself a lot of slack. Don't feel that, you have to get to a certain point by a certain time. Because what I've learned is that healing isn't a destination. It's a continuum, and it can be, and grieving is, very hard work. But like anything with hard work, we get results and we feel good. And, never lose hope. Tomorrow always comes. And never feel that you can't reach out, um, and let someone sit with you. You know, we don't have to say anything. We don't have to do anything. As I've learned from Tom Zuba, it's, just sit with somebody on the bench. That's all you have to do. And if you were like me, who did a lot of things on my own, I didn't ask for a lot of help prior to Dylan's death. I do now, because you can't do it alone.
Mm-hmm. Yes, thank you for that. I feel that also helps those that feel uncomfortable because they don't know how to help or what to do. So, yeah, sometimes just offering your presence
Mhm.
in silence. Thank you so much, Don. Thank you,
Well,
Dylan, for connecting us, for
right.
sharing your story.
You are absolutely a delight, Sylvia. And you are a wonderful medium. I enjoyed our time together that we had. And thank you for doing this. I think it's really important, especially now,
Mm,
in this almost hopefully post pandemic. There's a lot of stuff going on with mental health right now. And, mental health, there's a difference between mental health and mental illness. And to me, that I feel, mental health is nothing different than physical health. Mental illness, of course, is different. That's when we don't have control over that. That's something that goes on in our brain that we need extra help, maybe with medication. But mental health is a daily practice as well.
yeah, totally. I feel you. Like I have to practice every single day a specific set of things to keep my mental health on check,
Right.
because because I need to learn how to cope with those moments that we all have, right? And yes, we are surrounded by angels and our loved ones, but it always they cannot take decisions for us. We always have free will, and we are eventually the ones that need to decide. Okay, you know what? I need to breathe right now. I need to meditate. I need to go for a walk. I need to journal, whatever. I take cold showers in the morning because when I tell my mind and my body that I'm doing something, everything needs to follow. So it's as you were saying, it's hard, just like anything,
Mm,
but you get rewards.
yeah.
Truly, truly, truly.
Yeah.
All right. Thank you so much, Dawn. I wish you a
You're
wonderful
welcome.
day,
You
and I'll
too.
see you soon.
Okay.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye.
Much love. God bless.